I'm not smug, Adam.
There is a question.
I'm merely countering rhetoric with facts.
I think if you said to the public, actually, public services have got better under the Conservatives under the last 13 years, I think they would laugh in your face.
Morning, Adam. Morning, Kate.
I've got to ask you about levelling up. How is cutting the rail link to Manchester on HS2 going to help levelling up in the north of England?
Well, you're making an assumption there, which I don't think it's quite right to make. But overall,
you can't deny it, though, can you?
The key thing about levelling up is that it's about more than one ingredient. So transport matters, infrastructure matters, but within that, it's also the case that links within and between northern and Midland cities matter. And more than just infrastructure, levelling up involves research and development spend being spent more effectively. It involves the devolution of power to local leaders who can help to transform their areas. It involves improving education and skills. I could go on, but I hope that the point is made that you cannot simply look at one ingredient and say that that is the only test of levelling up.
But it was something that the government thought was a good idea and now doesn't want to do or can't do.
Well, firstly, it is a good idea. That's why we're still working hard, and there are spades in the ground, as the Prime Minister pointed out earlier, today, constructing the project. However, we also have to look at value for money. When HS2 was first conceived, the costs were significantly lower than they've subsequently turned out to be, and we have to look at every project in order to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck.
I understand that, but at the same time, if you look at great periods of British expansion, if you look at the 19th century, it was about building, it was about getting infrastructure improved, and the real payoff as far as the north of England was concerned was that as part of HS2 there was going to be the new Northern Powerhouse Rail going east-west, which everybody sees is necessary. And now you've got to say that, you know, dream on. They're not going to get that for decades, are they?
Let's wait and see. And I think the critical thing is we're already seeing significant infrastructure investment across the north. We've devoted billions of pounds already to improving transport links in the north of England, and critically, it's often the case that it's transport within a particular urban area that matters most. So we're here in Manchester. The B network that has just been launched by the Mayor of Manchester is an effective integrated transport system.
Which is a reverse privatisation.
Well, it is an interesting thing. It is actually the handing back of franchising or licensing powers to a local mayor. And again, you know, I think it shows a pragmatic Conservative approach, but it also shows levelling up in action.
But see, you're talking about this 20 million for 50 towns over 10 years. The truth is that under this government, the amount of money that the central government grant going to councils has been cut by billions. It's not a question of a few millions. I mean, it's been cut by billions, hasn't it? 20, 30 billion.
Well, it was certainly the case that during the period immediately after 2010, local government budgets were placed under, I think quite rightly, a degree of scrutiny.
Cut of up to 40%. I mean, that's more than scrutiny.
And certainly, in the last spending review, we saw a significant increase in the amount of money available.
Yeah, but still 10% on year below what they were getting before 2009.
And I think people in the local government sector would say that the most important thing to do is to make sure that the money that is in the hands of local government is spent and targeted wisely. That's why we're creating a new body, the Office for Local Government, in order to enable all of us to look at those local councils. I mean, what
you're doing is you're talking about devolution and shifting power to councils, while with the other hand, you're taking away their money, their resources, their ability to do anything.
No, I don't accept that. I think it was the case that there was a period in the immediate aftermath of the global financial problems that we had in 2000,
more than a decade.
In 2008, when we did have to look at every government department in order to seek economies. We're now in a position where, notwithstanding the inflationary pressures that we're all facing, we're able to support local government in that work. And critically, what we do is we complement the work that local government does. We complement the initiative that local leaders show by intervening and supporting in particular areas. For example, the 55 towns that we've identified, including towns in Scotland and Wales, will be supported to deal with some of the antisocial behaviour that sometimes inhibits people from spending time and money in the high streets that need reviving.
But some people might say that antisocial behaviour wouldn't be a problem if resources hadn't have been removed from some of the schemes that supported youth clubs, for example, in the beginning. But I just want to pick you up on something you said
I would
previously.
disagree with that, but anyway.
I just want to pick you up on something you said about HS2 before we come on to talk about taxes. You said we need to wait and see. Why should the North wait and see?
Well, I think all of us are considering at this stage how we get the maximum value for money. But
not all of us are, because everybody in Birmingham knows that where they are with HS2. You're asking the rest of the North to wait and see. Why should they have to wait and see?
Well, the North has already been the focus of attention on my part in a number of ways. So no one in the North has had to wait to see the expansion and devolution. No one in the North has had to wait and see the improvement in our schools. No one in the North has had to wait and see the establishment of investment zones and free ports. If you're in Redcar, you haven't had to wait and see what Ben Houchin has done. He's brought 4,000 high-paying jobs to Teesworks. So, of course...
Are they there yet?
Yes, he has cleared the land.
They're 4,000 people employed now?
No, the commitment has been made by investors to create those jobs.
Let's come on to talk about taxes.
But again, I think it's important to stress that when we talk about levelling up, we need to recognise that, for example, in the north of England, even though there's still more to do, schools have been transformed. That there are more children from state schools who are going to our top universities, and that the investment that we've seen in, particularly in our northern cities, has seen Manchester and Leeds become economic powerhouses. We now need to make sure that that prosperity spreads to the towns around those cities, which haven't necessarily had
a fair share of the sauce pot. And some would argue the best way of doing that would be to stick to the plans that you've already made on HS2 so that Northern Powerhouse Rail can expand as promised. But let's move on to taxes because we don't have a lot of time. How helpful is it on the weekend that you go into a conference for 30-odd Tories to say that they won't vote for tax hikes in the budget?
I think it's an example of the spirit that animates the Conservative Party, which is that we want, whenever possible and wherever possible, to give people more of their own money back.
It's not a great look, though, is it, for your party to have, 30 people, including Liz Truss, Priti Patel, Sir Jake Berry, lots of people who you've just been talking about who support, devolution in the north of the country, you're saying enough is enough, government. You're not listening to us behind the scenes, so we're prepared to go public. It's a little bit more than spirited, I think.
No, I think that's unfair to Priti and to Jake and to Liz. I think what they're doing is what all politicians do, which is campaigning from the heart on an issue they believe in, but it is an issue that all Conservatives share. We all want to see taxes reduced. I'm very strongly of the view that the most beneficial tax cut that we can bring about is by bringing inflation down. That is the biggest pressure on people's cost of living. But as and when we can, we should also seek to reduce other taxes as well.
Yeah, I mean, some people would argue, a lot of people, in fact, that inflation isn't a tax. So, I mean, but I think the point about the group of people who've signed this pledge is you are coming here to Manchester ahead of the next general election. You're basically launching your election campaign with huge divides in your party. Your party is so disunited. How can it possibly form the next government?
No, that's where I would gently disagree. I mean, I think it's no secret that Liz Truss and I may have not always agreed about everything in the past, but I completely agree with Liz here. I think that the principle that we should seek to reduce taxation is one that unites the Conservative Party.
So will you sign the pledge?
I think that as a member of the government, the pledge that I make is I will work every day with our Chancellor and others to get value for money, to bear down on the cost of government, to deal, for example, with the 4-day week problem
Michael
that we
Gove?
have.
Isn't that interesting? Because I'm saying to you, do you agree with this pledge? And you're saying, yes, I agree. And it's very important for the Conservative Party to talk about low taxes. But when I ask you to act on it, so more than words, show me your action, sign the pledge, guarantee you won't sign up for more taxes in the budget, you can't do it.
Two things.
Yes.
Having been in government for a wee while, I don't need to sign any pledges to show my commitment to reducing the size of government.
Well, then why is your party asking you to do it?
No.
They don't trust you, do they?
Well, it's... different people will campaign in different ways.
But they don't trust you. That's the point here.
Well, I think that you'll have to ask them. But the key thing is, I think, though I could be wrong, that when people see any manifestation of enthusiasm by any group of Conservatives on any issue, they reach for the cliche-ometer and they say, oh, it's a split, it's a division. You know, this is a party divided. I think that's just nonsense. I think it is the case that every Conservative believes in lowering tax whenever we can. But the critical thing is, I've asked just a second. I've been asked to sign all sorts of pledges and all sorts of things in the past, and I think, judge me and judge this government on our actions.
But isn't the reality that when you say we're the low tax party, we'll never put up taxes and all the rest, that what you're saying is if we stay in power, people can just expect public services, the health service, etc., to carry on deteriorating as they have deteriorated over the last 13 years?
Public services deteriorated over the last 13 years?
Yes.
Have you been looking at what's been happening in our state schools, Adam?
I mentioned the NHS to you.
I'm mentioning education. So you've said public services have deteriorated.
Well, there are all sorts of ways of fixing entrance exam and entrance results and all that.
No, I'm not talking about fixing anything, Adam.
And that started.
Okay,
Adam,
Adam,
I don't want to get into an argument about schools. Overall,
why not? Why don't you?
Are you seriously saying to the public that public services as a whole have not deteriorated over the past 13 years of Conservative rule?
Why don't you want to get into a discussion about schools?
No, I'm asking you a question.
Yes, and I think that your answer is revealing, Adam, because I'm pointing out an area, that there are a number of others I could come to, where we've seen real improvements over the course of the last 13 years. More schools that are good or outstanding. Us, as a country, doing well in international league tables.
We've had a series
of
strikes.
You made a sweeping rhetorical claim, and I'm coming back with facts.
If you want to get it the other way, you had a government recommendation to spend 15 billion to put back the damage done to education during COVID. You spent less than 2 billion on that. That's one example. If you've had teachers' strikes because they haven't got pay, I know people working in the state education system who are having to lay off staff, lay off support staff. So just sitting there smugly and saying, oh yeah, the schools have got brilliant. I put that test out to the public, but I don't think it's a fact for you to claim that. More broadly, there is a question.
I'm not smug, Adam.
There is a question.
I'm merely countering rhetoric with facts.
I think if you said to the public, actually, public services have got better under the Conservatives under the last 13 years, I think they would laugh in your face.
Well, I'm sure that you get a variety of reactions, and I'm sure that people would also say, well, what we want are detailed, analytical reporting of facts, and the critical thing is, I'm pointing out...
I want a straight answer.
I'm pointing out...
I'm not getting that either.
Yes, you are.
Well,
you're getting objective criteria there.
Let's take the proposal.
On the NHS as well.
Let's take the proposal you're attacking that the Labour Party have come up with to put VAT on school fees. Are you in favour of that or not?
The Labour Party can do what it likes.
What do you think of that policy?
I think the most important thing...
What do you think of that policy? Do you oppose that policy?
You're deliberately changing the subject away from your earlier point.
You raised education. Here's an issue.
Yes.
Labour Party say they can put VAT on school fees, and I'm asking you if you oppose that policy. They say they want to do that to invest in state education.
Yeah, come on. I mean, they don't have any plans for state education. Can you
tell me? Well, they do. That's one plan.
No.
They say raise £1.5 billion to put into state education.
Can you tell me, Adam, a single thing that Labour will do to improve state education?
Do you support that plan or not?
Can you tell me what Labour's plan for education is apart from a tax increase?
Because your party opposes that plan and is already campaigning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you oppose it?
Yeah, of course I do.
Which is why, of course, you wrote an article in the Times advocating it a few years ago.
I think the case that I made was very, very different from the position that Labour are taking now. But can you tell me a single thing that Labour would do to improve education beyond tax increases?
You did write an article, just for a record, you did write an article saying that the AT should put on private school fees, didn't you?
I wrote a number of articles about how to improve education, but more importantly, I spent 4 years as Education Secretary, and as a result of that, we're seeing significant improvements in education. I also made sure that I was part of a campaign that secured £350 million extra a week for the NHS, money that we have delivered. I've also been part of an administration that ensured that we took people earning below £12,500 out of income tax. I've also been part of an administration that has ensured that we're decarbonising faster than any G7 country, that we have introduced a system of support for farmers that is the most enlightened environmentally anywhere in the world. I've also been part of an administration that has ensured that we were able to provide furlough, the most generous support for people facing unemployment during the COVID pandemic.
I think the fact checkers are going to be busy, but
okay,
Kate,
Michael,
you've got
Gove,
a final
Michael
question.
Gove, we have to let you go.
The point
we
is,
have to
Adam,
let you go.
that you launched an attack. And I know it's journalistic, so I recognise that the rhetorical flourish is in the service of truth. But you launched an attack on our record. I'm launching a defence of our record because if you look back,
I was specific on public services.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut in here because
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Michael Gove, you have to leave us. I will just say though, in that article, you did write that it was a tax advantage VAT that allows the wealthiest in this country, indeed the very wealthiest in the globe, to buy a prestige service that secures their children a permanent positional edge in society at a 20% discount. But I have to ask you before we let you go, the sycamore tree, the very sad felling of the sycamore tree. What do you think should happen now? Because there are lots of people around the country who are very upset by it. You know, they're very frustrated by it. What would you like to see happen?
Well, my understanding is that the roots of the sycamore tree are such that we can see it regrow. I think the most important thing to do would be to make sure that by whatever means we can not just see that tree regrow, but also see many more trees planted in order to show our commitment to the reforestation of important parts of our country.
Michael Gove, thank you for joining us.
Always good to have Michael Gove with us. We're going to be speaking to the pollster, and thank you very much indeed.